Hi everyone, here is a little walkthrough of Assessment Task 2 to give you a little bit of background as to how I'd approach the task if I were to do it. The basics of the task are to identify an incident or a scenario from one industry and then talk about what people from another industry can learn about safety from that incident. So in the task, the client asks us to research and present on an Australian workplace safety incident and tell them what they can learn from it. So an incident in one industry being presented to people in another industry. You get to identify who your client is. You prepare some PowerPoints to inform them about the incident and what they can learn from it. The task asks you to describe what happened in the scenario or incident, why it's important or interesting, the factors that contributed to it, and you've got to do that using models and theory from the literature, and also to think about what improvements could be made in future. The task also talks about making a compelling argument for your client about what they can learn from the incident. In thinking about this compelling argument, I'd be thinking about what similarities you could draw between the incident and your client's industry, and thinking about whether those similarities are there at a surface level or at a really more deeper level. So something at a more surface level would be similarities in the kinds of hazards in the incident and the kinds of hazards in your client's industry, or the kinds of workers in the incident and the kinds of workers that your client employs. But I'll give you an example of something that's at a little bit of a deeper level as well. So there was an incident some time ago at a hospital. So we're talking about the healthcare industry, where a patient became violent and broke some glass and was threatening workers. The workers had other patients to look after as well as their own safety to be mindful of. When the incident went to judgment in court, the judge reminded the parties that the employer had to first think about the impact on workers, not patients, but on workers, that their safety was the primary duty. So thinking about how this might apply to other industries, how is this concept of worker safety being the primary concern, how does that apply to, say, a situation in education, for example, in a school, where teachers have to look after children but can also be placed at risk themselves? That's an example of making a conceptual link between one incident or an element of an incident and what also needs to happen in another quite different industry between healthcare and education. So that's an example of a more deep conceptual link and would demonstrate why that second industry, education, could learn from that particular incident that we have already outlined. Of course, I didn't outline it for you in great detail. I gave you a very brief summary. But you'd do a much better job of telling us all about what that incident involved, what happened, why it was interesting, why it was important, what the contributing factors were, all the things that the assessment task asks you to do. While we mentioned before that you get to choose the industry of your client, one of the other key things that's important to this task is your choice of incident or scenario. I'd be looking in a wide range of sources to help me develop a short list of potential incidents or scenarios. In fact, given that this is group work, I'd be asking everyone in the group to find at least one incident each. Bring it back to the group so that together as a group we could make that short list and make a decision about what incident we're going to use. Again, I'd look in lots of different places. And note that the assignment brief says to not only rely on news reports, you often don't get enough information there, but look at safety regulator websites, look for prosecution summaries, look in textbooks and readings associated with the course. So there's a lot that you can do in the early stages to do your research and prepare, setting yourself up for a response that not only hits the brief but is easier for you to write. Whenever I'm preparing a response like this, in fact any assessment, I'd make sure I've checked the brief in the beginning, I'd check it throughout, and I'd check it again at the end. You should always be monitoring the brief to make sure that you're addressing it comprehensively. One of the marking criteria that I want to point out is how integrated your response looks in terms of the integration of your group work. So be aware of that in your process. Consider whether splitting the task up and working on it individually is really the best strategy for achieving a good result, or whether you should have a process that ensures active and meaningful group work. There's some guidance from UNSW to help you set up a group contract or arrangement in terms of how you're going to work, and I encourage you to use that. You'll also be asked during submission to evaluate each other's work and contributions to the report. So bear that in mind when you're contributing to the task, that others are going to be rating you, and that could have an effect on your final mark. As always, you should be aware of referencing. Make sure that you reference all the resources that you use. Place those references in the text, in the slides where you use them, as well as at the end of the slides. They should be in author date format. You'll need to use references. You'll need to use them from UNSW Library, not just from Google. So don't just go for websites. Go and find things in the UNSW databases. There's plenty of resources there. You just got to go and have a look for them. Also think about how it looks when you just screenshot a graph. Are there resources, images, pictures that you can make your own versions of to make them your own, rather than just snapping them out of someone else's document? If you do snap them out of someone else's document, make sure they're referenced too. So I hope this provides a bit of a background that helps you prepare for Assessment Task 2, and I look forward to seeing the scenarios that you're going to analyse. If you need some assistance, just get in touch. Let's make an appointment and we can have a chat through your group's work.